So the video stopped. So we're going to keep going right there. Of slave bodies in the United States. And that number was 13,320,000. And again, that's over an insurable period of 5.5 years based on a max production value of 180. All right. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Compared to the GDP of a year, all right, they said that slave labor contributed to about 80% of the economic or the economy or the GDP of America in the height of slavery. So that would put this labor at approximately 3,862,800,000. So 80% of that, that's the 80%. So the 20% that's missing would put you up around four and four and a half, somewhere around in there. All right. That was the average GDP, give or take. All right. So those numbers show what it costs to buy a slave, what the max production value of a slave was, which was 180,000, and the insurable value of a slave over insurable period of 5.5 years at approximately $32,727. All right, so I felt like you needed to know that, and the reason why you needed to know that because when you start asking this next portion of valuable questions to know and that needs to be answered when having a conversation about this transatlantic slave trade in the United States, you need to know those bits of information. So let's get into these questions. The first question I want to answer, and I've already alluded to this. The first question I want to answer is did or does the transatlantic slave trade make economic sense? So I'm going to preface this. Initially it did, but over time it did not. So when you look at slavery, I think the cumulative would suggest no, it did not make economic sense. When you look at the numbers, no, it did not make economic sense. Did it serve a purpose? Yeah, absolutely it did. But I think over time, cumulatively, it did not serve a purpose. And the reason why I say no, more concretely, is because the numbers do not support the narrative, right? And when I say the numbers, I'm talking about the 407, and I'm talking about that 13. I'm talking about this 32,000 value for a slave over a 5-year period. So those numbers to me do not support the narrative that slaves, mostly stolen from Africa, make up make up the United States slave population. All right. If you look at the numbers, the numbers don't support that. Not to mention that it isn't economically sound to capture, transport, enslave, and indoctrinate a people when there is existing population within the conquered land, the United States, or what became the United States, that are without half the liability of the enslavement process. And what I mean by that is, like, in the stolen African slave story, it's understood that the process of that, and I'm simplifying it, was to capture, transport, enslave, and indoctrinate the people. But with the indigenous people that were enslaved in a country, half of that process goes away. You don't have to capture them. Well, you do, but it's a different type of capture. The second part is, which is the big one, you don't have to transport them. All right, not like with what you had with crossing the Atlantic. All right, you only have the biggest portion is the enslavement and the indoctrination of the people. So the answer again, did it make economic sense? No, it did not. More specifically to the second part of my question, the second part of my answer. The first part of my answer deals with the fact that it didn't serve, like, it doesn't make sense to me and in my logic to take a group of people from a foreign land when you got a group of people in the conquered land that you're in. All right, so it doesn't feed to that narrative. The second question is, does all or the majority of the so-called blacks in the United States originate from the stolen peoples from the African continent? All right. And that again, this is based on a common narrative, a common conversation that we have among ourselves, the media have among, their constituents and, politicians and, people. These are conversations that people have. Is the idea that blacks originate from stolen peoples from the African continent. All right. My answer to this is simply no. Again, the numbers don't support the narrative where 42 million blacks originate from a cumulative, right? When you break this number down, a cumulative of 118,030 slaves stolen from Africa in the United States within a 290-year period between 1570 and 1860. It doesn't make sense. It does not support it. I don't care if you're 23andMe and your Ancestry.com and your Heritage.com or whatever you want to, DNA test you want to take says. All right. Yeah, it says that 50% of my ancestry is in Africa. But what it does not say is at what point my ancestry came from Africa. It doesn't say if my ancestry came from Africa before the colonizer or during the colonizer. Now, if you're of the mindset that only the colonizer was smart enough to circumnavigate the globe and to put people on ships and to send people to distant lands across the Atlantic or the Pacific or wherever ocean, if you think he's the only one that's capable of doing that, then, okay, this narrative works. But if you understand that there's this continent in Africa where they built things like the pyramids, or if you look at, the continent that we're currently in, where they built pyramids as well, and monuments and so on and so forth, you realize there's a level of intelligence that is often dismissed that the black or brown man has, that's often taken and given credit to the white man as being the only one that has it. All right. And again, this is not a narrative that I believe in, is not a narrative that I feed into. So again, if I'm looking at my Ancestry.com DNA test and it says that I derive from Africa, yeah, it does say that. But I also have to understand it doesn't say when my people got here from Africa and by what means they got here from Africa. All right. So with that, furthermore, the notion that 2% of the enslaved population could outpace 98% of all the other enslaved population is just simply ridiculous. So what that means is, if I'm saying only 2% of the stolen people made it to the continental United States, it is ridiculous to think that group of people could outpace the other 98% of stolen people that was taken elsewhere, whether it was Santo Domingo, whether it was Cuba, whether it was Haiti, whether it was Panama, whether it was Brazil, whether it was New Guinea, wherever it was. It is ridiculous to think that the black diaspora, the black population in the United States, would outpace at 42 million to current date Panama, Cuba, Haiti. It's ridiculous to think that. Like, that does not make sense. All right. So that's question number 2. Question number 3. A little bit shorter question, a little bit shorter answer. All right. And this is a trigger question. This is a trigger question. But it is a relevant question. I will say that this question and the way I answer it, it is limited. It is limited. It's not a absolute answer. So let me ask the question. The question is, are blacks in the U.S. due reparations? Are blacks in the United States due reparations? My answer to that question is yes. Now that I've said yes, blacks in America or in the United States are due reparations, let me explain. All right, and it's not a complicated explanation. They are only due reparations in the form of land, L-A-N-D. All right, no more, no less. And the reason I say this, and I'll explain, the answer is yes, but only in the form of land that was acquired through means of manifest destiny for the purpose of the land. So what does this mean? This means that you're only due reparations if you could prove and show that your people didn't cooperate with the colonizer. Didn't say, okay, I'm going to sign a treaty and I'm going to give you my land, and in return for my land, you're going to give me medicine, you're going to give me food, you're going to give me shelter. If only you could say that. If you could say if your people did not do that, only then are you due reparations. All right? And this would be seen in the form, and this happened in the United States, where, where it most often happened was when the 13 colonies expanded and people began to move west. And basically people, by decree of manifest destiny, they put down their flag. They said, this is the name of such and such. And if the local people or the people that were already there tried to fight it or dispute it, the manifest destiny decree made their claim irrelevant. And the person that made the manifest destiny decree could call on the United States government or the police agency, whether it was the marshal, the sheriff, or whatever, in to have you forcibly removed. Your people forcibly removed. And they did this. All right. There's many stories about the natives that this happened to. Now, unfortunately, the idea of a native and the reality of a native are two different things. So when we talk about the idea of a native is the people that are most often referred to as Native Americans. The reality of a native is the fact that only 2% of the population that was stolen from Africa actually made it to the United States. All right, that's the reality of the natives. All right, now how that translates into total native population, that's a different conversation. But the idea and the reality of a native is two very different things. All right. So, and that again is blacks due reparations. Simple answer is yes, but only in the form of land. Fourth, and again, this goes into the conspiracy theory. This goes into the boogeyman and the Chupacabra, and the Bigfoot, and Loch Ness Monster, the conspiracy. This is for you guys. This is the answer to your question. Why indoctrinate and propagate the stolen African slavery story that's more often told? Okay? This question is a common question. Now, it might not be asked the way I asked it, but it is a common question. Why indoctrinate and propagate the stolen African slave story that's most often told? All right. Why do you get it in school? Why do you get it on TV and movies and TV shows? Why do you get it in university? Why is this story propagated and indoctrinated? Simple word. And I've already said it once. And I'm going to say it again. It's 4 letters. L-A-N-D. Land. It's about land. Right? And the colonization of this country, land was the most important thing. And it still is. It still is. All right? So, what does this mean? What does this mean? If a group of people are strategically convinced they originate from a faraway land, Africa, right? Their rightful claim to the conquered land in which they dwell appears to be without merit. All right? So what that means is if you got a document like I got from Ancestry.com that says 50% of who you are came from Africa, even though it doesn't say when you came from Africa, it can't say when you came from Africa. It can assert when you came from Africa, but it can't say with 100% certainty that you came from Africa at any point. It becomes very, very difficult for you to assert a rightful claim that this conquered land belonged to you or belonged to your ancestors. All right? Because you've been indoctrinated and you've taken in and consumed all of this propagated information. Again, rather through movie, rather through television, rather through education, on whatever level that you derive or originate from stolen peoples from Africa. All right? It makes it very hard to do that. And it appears to be without merit. Number 5, and it's the last question, and then we're going to close. And again, this goes into the conspiracy conversation. Was there a grand conspiracy to indoctrinate and propagate the story of slavery as it's often told? Again, very common question. Again, it may not be asked the way that I'm asking it, but it is a common question. Was there a grand conspiracy to indoctrinate and propagate the story of slavery as it's often told? All right. That answer, once again, is no. No group of people, not in the way that we like to spout off, got in a room and decided that the black man had to get his. No one did that. No one killed a mysterious goat and prayed to a mysterious God in front of a mysterious fire or candle and said, a chant and put their hands together and drapes naked and all of this foo-foo that you hear out there. No one did that. So there wasn't this cabal or this Illuminati. None of that happened. But, B-U-T, what did happen? What did happen? And it started long before the United States of America and the Transatlantic slave trade was even exist. What did happen This is what happened. And there's clear record of this. Of a learn and practice strategy with the purpose of conquering people and acquiring land. All right. So if you call that a conspiracy, then I don't know what to tell you. Because that's anywhere you look in historical record, you'll find that there was a learned strategy, a learned practice of strategy to conquer people, or with the purpose of conquering people and acquiring land. All right. Now, the methodology of how this was done was different from group to group, place to place. But this methodology goes back as far as antiquity, as far as the first civilization in Sumer and the second civilization in Egypt or Kemet. And it was mirrored and replicated by each advanced civilization that came in time. Whether it was the Sumerians, the Egyptians, whether it was the Greeks, the Romans, the Franks, the English, so on and so forth. All right. And it is one of those things where didn't matter the language, didn't matter if it was English, Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish, French, whatever. The process, the learned and practiced strategy was understood to work. So, no, it was not a conspiracy, but it was a learn and practice process that obviously worked in terms of conquering people and acquiring land. So, with all of that, here we are at the end of these videos and my explanation of why the narrative and the story we've been taught and told for many, many years about us originating from Africans stolen from Africa, or slaves stolen from Africa and being turned into slaves is some BS. All right. So I hope this helps somebody. I hope this educates you, because that was my intent, to give you a reason to think beyond that which you have been given. All right. You can go out there and look at my numbers. You can go out there and look at my source. If you got any questions or comments, definitely put them down below. Like, share, subscribe. I'm your brother Tezwan. This has been Out of All Your Boxes. Peace.